The marble-lined Great Hall of Justice in The Hague falls silent as the judges of the International Court of Justice take their seats. Every camera in the room points toward the long wooden bench where, today, the world's top judicial body will issue a decision with sweeping consequences for one of the most fragile corners of the planet, the Gaza Strip. The president of the court, Yuji Iwasawa, begins reading the judgment in measured tones. His words carry both legal precision and moral weight. He reminds the packed chamber that under international law, Israel is obliged to ensure that humanitarian aid reaches the Palestinian population of Gaza without obstruction. He adds that the court reaffirms the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination, including the right to an independent and sovereign state living side by side in peace with the State of Israel. Those sentences echo through the hall, a reaffirmation of principles repeatedly cited by the United Nations Charter and the Security Council's own resolutions. Yet here, before the highest judicial authority in the world, they take on renewed force, because they come after nearly a year of destruction, shortages, and loss inside Gaza. The ruling demands that Israel facilitate humanitarian aid, cooperate with UN agencies, and refrain from any actions that impede relief operations. As Iwasawa explains further, Israel is under an obligation not to impede the operation of the United Nations entities, other international organizations and third states, and to cooperate in good faith to ensure respect for the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination. For the diplomats, lawyers, and journalists gathered here, these are not abstract legal phrases. They represent immediate life and death implications for more than 2 million people trapped behind sealed borders where food, water, and medicine have become scarce. In a second part of his statement, the ICJ president underscores another critical point. He warns that it is not possible to replicate the capacity of the United Nations through UNRWA to ensure that the population of the Gaza Strip is adequately supplied. UNRWA cannot be replaced on short notice and without a proper transition plan. That statement cuts to the heart of the ICJ's power, the moral and diplomatic weight of law in shaping behavior. It is not coercive force that moves states, but the accumulation of legitimacy, the fear of standing outside the boundaries of the law. At another podium nearby, Ammar Hijazi, the Palestinian delegate to the court, delivers a passionate response. He accuses certain governments of complicity in Gaza's suffering and of undermining the very institutions meant to protect civilians. Those who are complicit, those who have assisted this crime and allowed it to continue for so long, those who also assisted in defacing UNRWA and in the campaign against UNRWA, he says, should now make a U-turn and uphold their international responsibilities if they still believe in the primacy of international law. Hijazi's words reflect anger, but also a challenge. He is not only appealing to Israel, he is calling out the broader international community, asking it to stop shielding violations with political excuses. In his view, today's ICJ decision removes those excuses entirely. Whether the UN is allowed or not allowed, whether security considerations are something that should be considered or not, All of these are no longer valid in the eyes of the law and no longer valid even for states to make an excuse out of. He pauses briefly before adding, "We knew they were not valid from the start, but sometimes it takes a court of law to make these determinations, as in the case of genocide. How much reluctance do we still encounter from states to recognize that what is happening in Gaza is genocide?" His accusation resonates far beyond the courtroom. For months, humanitarian groups have described the crisis in Gaza as catastrophic, pointing to thousands of civilian deaths, widespread hunger, and mass displacement. But the word genocide carries specific legal weight, and Hijazi is pressing nations to confront what that word implies. Outside, demonstrators wave Palestinian flags in the autumn wind. Some hold signs reading "Justice for Gaza" and "Aid is a right." Others simply wait in silence, listening to the radio updates about the court's ruling. To them, the ICJ's words are more than symbolic. They are a small measure of international recognition amid relentless violence. In diplomatic missions from Brussels to Washington, officials begin passing the text of the decision. Legal experts note that while ICJ rulings are binding, the court lacks direct enforcement mechanisms. Still, the judgment increases the pressure on Israel's allies to ensure compliance. Governments that continue to supply arms or intelligence for operations in Gaza now face sharper scrutiny under international law. For Israel, the ruling poses a dilemma. Acknowledging the court's order could be seen domestically as a concession to international critics, yet ignoring it risks further isolation. The government has not yet issued a full response, but officials in Jerusalem have previously argued that security concerns justify restrictions on aid, insisting that Hamas exploits humanitarian channels for military purposes. The International Court of Justice, however, has now declared that such justifications are invalid. It insists that humanitarian obligations take precedence and that relief operations must be allowed to proceed unhindered. In essence, the court has drawn a legal red line. Starving civilians cannot be defended as a tactic of war. The decision also strengthens the position of aid organizations on the ground. UNRWA and the World Food Programme have both struggled to bring supplies through crossings blocked or slowed by Israeli inspections. Now they can point to the ICJ ruling as legal backing for expanded access. In Geneva, humanitarian coordinators describe a window of opportunity to scale up deliveries if the ruling translates into political action. In New York, the UN Secretary General calls on all member states to respect and implement the court's findings. For many in Gaza, these developments are distant yet crucial. Hospitals running on generators, families searching for clean water, children missing meals, all depend on whether aid trucks can cross the border. The ICJ's order does not guarantee that they will, but it sets a clear international expectation that they must. Back in The Hague, as the crowd thins, Ardi Imseis reflects on the deeper meaning of the decision. He tells journalists that international law moves slowly but inexorably. The ICJ has spoken, he says. Now it is for states to decide whether they will honour their obligations or betray them. For Ammar Hijazi, the message is moral as well as legal. If those who believe in international law remain silent, he warns, then they become part of the problem. The contrast between the formality of the courtroom and the chaos in Gaza could not be greater, yet the connection between them is undeniable. Every ruling, every paragraph in the ICJ's opinion may translate into a few more food parcels delivered, a few more hospital supplies reaching those in need. Over the coming days, diplomats will debate implementation, humanitarian convoys will line up at checkpoints, and political arguments will flare anew. But the court's decision has drawn a line in the sand. International law demands that aid flow, that life be preserved, that collective punishment end. As dusk settles over the Peace Palace, the building's stained glass windows catch the last traces of light, a symbolic image of hope and restraint amid conflict. Inside those walls, law has spoken clearly. The suffering of civilians can no longer be justified, and the responsibility to act lies with every state that claims to stand for justice.